Hello YouTube, and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we're talking about a much requested topic, education in the Elder Scrolls universe. This has been often requested over the past years, but it was most recently requested by Jack Jamieson. It's a hard topic as we don't know an awful lot about education in the Elder Scrolls universe, but I tried and I hope you guys will enjoy hearing what I have to say. So, let's get to it. Education in the Elder Scrolls universe is something we don't see an awful lot of in the games, and we might not always think about, likely for the obvious reason that it doesn't add to gameplay. However, it's an important part of the world and something that we can say some useful things about. First of all, we do get broad insights in specialized higher education in the Elder Scrolls universe. With specialized education I mean education in topics such as magic and bard education, with the Mages Guild universities, College of Winterhold and of course the Bards College in Solitude for bards. These are places where people get educated in specific professions, but also in other fields such as literature and writing in the case of the Bards College. There is also evidence for more types of higher education existing in the Elder Scrolls universe. Ever since Daggerfall, for example, we can find Introduction to Law Studies books, indicating that there is, or at least used to be, some formal education in law, for example for people to function within the bureaucracy of the kingdoms and the empire. Now, the most obvious place for higher education for academics is in the Elder Scrolls universe neither of those specialized institutions, but rather people would go to so-called schools of Julianos, the god of learning, wisdom and studying. I talked about these schools before in my video on Julianos, and they are essentially temples to Julianos, but instead of direct worship, the priests worship him through being an academic who pursue knowledge and create large libraries of collected knowledge. Students at these schools or temples learn no specific profession but get educated in a broad sense in subjects such as logic, philosophy and math. This makes these schools of Julianos the thing that is most like an actual university in the Elder Scrolls universe. We haven't seen these specific schools in the games ever since Daggerfall, but we do know that they exist and are an important part of the world, as we know that they exist on all of Tamriel, not just the Iliac Bay region where Daggerfall takes place. Now, the curious part of all this is that these schools, just like the specific educational facilities we talked about earlier, are only accepting people who already have some form of basic education. They will not teach you to learn to read and write, they just actually treat it as a college or a university in lore. The schools of Juliano specifically state that we advocate literacy and education for all citizens of Tamriel, but our policy for those who wish to join the schools itself is very stringent. We have little time to waste to train the slow and lazy. So while they say they are advocates for basic education, the schools themselves do not cover this type of education. They don't teach children to read and write, but the big question is, who does then? The answer is never directly given to us, save for some offhand mentions. Now, in Bethesda's other series, Fallout, we actually have an actual children's school in Fallout 4 and Diamond City, but in Elder Scrolls, these kind of facilities for children are just completely missing from the games. So then the question is, where do children get educated? Now, while some might say, are children even formally educated? I'd say yes, because nearly everyone on Tamriel can read and write, something that's a specific skill that needs to be taught to an individual. Even peasants and poor farmers can read, and in some cases even beggars, because they write notes, have notes sent to them, and own books. Nearly every house on Tamriel has books. The literacy rate in the Elder Scrolls universe is astonishingly high. But how is that possible? In our own universe in the past, people's education would mostly be covered by whatever the parents knew, and sometimes their children would be educated by religious institutions or guilds if the parents could afford a religious institution or were part of a guild. Now, while our universe and the Elder Scrolls universe are not always comparable in terms of social history, in this specific case it might offer some clues, and they might be more comparable than some people would suggest. Because we know that in the Elder Scrolls universe, education, specifically literacy, gets covered by the parents for most parts, at least in the poorer families. We can learn this from several sources. A good example is the book Onus of the Ogma, where it specifically mentions that children learn to write in the Elder Scrolls universe by having to keep a journal, and that it's the parents who teach them to do this. In addition to that, we can find a note in Skyrim where the steward of Windhelm has sent a letter to Aventus Aretino, the orphan boy who starts the Dark Brotherhood questline. In this note, he specifically mentions that the steward doesn't know whether Aventus can read the note, as he doesn't know how much his dead mother was able to teach him in that regard. Meaning that reading and writing is the responsibility of the parents in the Elder Scrolls universe, and that the children mostly learn it through writing a journal in their daily life. So that's something I specifically found interesting, that they learn writing and reading through writing a journal. However, another interesting implication of the letter to Aventus Aretino is that it's this letter that informs him that he gets sent to an orphanage, which implies that the orphanage would have been responsible for his learning to read and write as well, if he didn't have those skills already when he arrived. Meaning that orphanages also have some responsibility to educate, and it's quite likely to assume that some villages also might have a sort of village elder who is too old to work, as for example a lumberjack or a blacksmith, and that a village elder may actually be responsible for the children's literacy in villages where the parents are mostly busy. What's interesting, however, is that it's not just the parents who educated children themselves, or these village elders. In the book Owners of the Ogma, it also specifically mentions teachers, and in Morrowind, Imperial NPCs actually brag about the high standard of literacy in the Empire due to the good education and schooling system in the Empire. While parents may be part of this equation in rural areas and less developed provinces like Skyrim, it's to be assumed from these dialogue that in lore there must be some form of central education in form of basic elementary schools in the larger cities or maybe larger important towns, where parents may be too busy with their own business to educate their children. It's also very possible that the Imperial government sort of subsidizes these schools and maybe even subsidizes guilds and religious organizations to found these schools and educate the children. As we for example know from a quest in Morrowind that the Mages Guild at least used to offer people literacy education because they wanted to make the done more literate. Which would only be possible with funding from Imperial government, if this quote from Morrowind is true of course. Now, outside of the Empire, we know that other governments also educate the people through religious institutions. For example, we know that the Tribunal in Morrowind used their large religious apparatus, the Tribunal Temple, to educate the people of Morrowind and make them literate. We also know from the book The Argonian Account that there are schools of sorts for Argonian children to be educated in Tamrielic. And apparently these schools exist to reduce the crime rate in Argonia. I don't know, I found that funny. Now, basically that's everything that I could find on the topic. There's only a few sentences and things scattered around the world, but there's a lot more than I suspected than I would find, and not only that, the sources that I did find are all actually consistent at that, meaning that Bethesda did think about the topic. And there we have it, another very obscure lore topic covered. I hope you enjoyed it. And before I end things, allow me to thank my top patrons: Bernardo Binda, Metaloid1v1, Gabriel Binda, Mr. Para, Mr. Christmas, and Hammer of the Scots. These wonderful people, along with all the others on screen, make my weekly lore series possible, and I'm very grateful for that. That said, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope that I'll see you next Friday when the next Elder Scrolls lore video airs. See you later.